Hi, I just got back from 1 month in Sydney, Australia, and some of the suburbs like Penrith, and then I also spent a week in New Zealand. I had a great time, but before I left on my trip, I spent a lot of time researching what to expect when I got there and things to do before leaving. And I thought now that I've experienced the whole thing, and it was a great experience, I wanted to share with the community 10 things that you could keep in mind while you're there and things you need to do before you even leave. So let's get started. My first tip is before you leave, keep in mind that as a US citizen, you still need a visa to visit both New Zealand as well as Australia. And luckily, it's really easy to apply for both. For the Australia visa, there's an app you need to download on your phone that makes it super easy to scan your passports, add a few additional pieces of information about your trip, take a photo, and also make the payment. And you can do those same exact steps using the New Zealand government website and get your visa applied for. And it usually takes a couple of days for it to be approved. And once it's approved, it's all electronically tied to your passport. So when you are checking in at the airport, when you're landing in either country, you don't need to produce any printed document, which is what I did. You don't need to do that. Now, the second thing is also make sure you have a high-speed data plan from your mobile carrier. Like for my case, it's T-Mobile. I applied for a high-speed data plan while I was going to be in Australia and New Zealand. But you can also very easily, in a few minutes, buy an eSIM from many different eSIM providers online. Just do a quick Google search for it, and in about $10 and 10 minutes later, you'll have your eSIM ready to go, installed on your phone. And when you land, all you need to do is activate it. And then you have your high-speed data coverage while you are traveling. So tip number 2 is all about the flights. Either way you slice it, you're going to have a long flight. And our flight was from Chicago, about 4.5 hours to Vancouver, where we had a couple of hours layover, and then 14.5 to 15 hours nonstop flying from Vancouver to Sydney. And then on the reverse trip, it was the exact same itinerary. Now, I have two approaches to handle that long flight. One approach involves staying awake the whole flight and keeping yourself busy doing something mundane but not too tiring, like reading books on a Kindle or your iPad. I wouldn't advise watching movies. What I did was actually connected to the Wi-Fi and try to get some work done. When I was done with all that work and writing up a document or whatever, the flight was ready to land. You can also edit your photos from the trip on the way back, which is what I did on the way back as well. The other option, which I used as well on the way there, was to try to sleep as much as I could when I wasn't doing something on my computer. So I just put my earplugs in, cover my eyes with an eye cover, lean back as much as I could, tuck that pillow at the back of the seat so it acted as a prop, and put my backpack under my feet. So that kind of straightened me out. So I wasn't lying down, but I was more like at a 45-degree angle. So I tried to sleep as much as I could. Now, when I checked my watch, it said I only slept for about 4 hours on the whole 15-hour flight. But nonetheless, when I landed, a couple of coffees later, I was ready to go. And we actually visited 4 different places in Sydney on our first day as soon as we landed. So no jet lag the next day, because when we got to the hotel, we crashed and we were super tired. Tip number 3 is all about money. The first thing you need to keep in mind is you don't need to take cash with you. You don't need US dollars and convert them into Australian dollars or New Zealand dollars like I had to do in other countries, because everything is cashless. You just use your credit card or your phone or your watch, and you pay using Apple Pay or whatever, and it's super easy to do. The other thing is when you are getting on public transport like ferries and buses, everyone in your group needs to have a separate credit card, because when you tap on, you each individual needs to tap on with a separate credit card. So I made this mistake and I got into a little bit of trouble, but it was fine. The bus driver said, don't worry about it. So that's the second piece of advice. The third thing is it's a really great, amazing thing in Australia and New Zealand that I'm sure everyone from the US will appreciate, is you don't have to pay tips when you eat at a restaurant or Pretty much any time that I was going to pay a tip, there was not even an option to pay a tip. So you see a price on the menu, you go ask for it, you eat it, and when you're done, there's not even a place for you to sign and give a tip. So if you do want to give a tip, you have to give them a tip in cash, which I didn't see most people doing. People only tip when it's exceptional and above and beyond normal service. So that was my favorite thing about doing any kind of eating out or transactions in Australia. My fourth tip is about eating out and food. I was just talking about that in the previous point, but let's talk about it in more detail. I would say the most wonderful thing about being in Australia, being in New Zealand, was that the baseline quality of food, no matter where we went, whether it was a high-end hotel which we stayed at, or downtown Sydney or Auckland. By the way, they call that Central Business District or CBD, not downtown, like we do in the US. Anywhere we ate, whether it was a hole in the wall, whether it was a winery, whether it was a little fast food place on a road trip in New Zealand, there was a certain baseline quality of food, and that was not matched anywhere in the US. So when I go out to eat and I want to eat at a nice place, I need to go to downtown Chicago or downtown Milwaukee to eat a good meal. In the suburbs, I don't really get really good food. I felt in Sydney, in Penrith, in all the cities we visited in New Zealand, anywhere I went, whether it was a small family-owned shop or a big chain, it was always good food. Besides the food, I was super impressed by the quality of coffee. Again, the baseline level of quality was way better than our baseline, which is Dunkin' Donuts, coffee from gas stations, Starbucks, which I can barely drink. And I only drink those kind of coffees if I'm desperate. But usually when I want to drink good coffee, I need to go to a local roastery or a high-end coffee shop, which are kind of hard to come by in the US. I mean, you have to go somewhere special, like downtown, to get it. Right? But in Sydney, in Penrith, and all the cities I visited in New Zealand, no matter where we stopped, there was a certain baseline quality of coffee that was comparable to a high-end coffee shop in the US. And when they had actual high-end coffee, that was even better than that. And what's amazing about it right now is that the exchange rate is so favorable that the pricing ends up being pretty reasonable. So you get a really good meal and a really good cup of coffee for much less than you would in the US. I was impressed and happy that they had so many tropical fruit that I've missed for a while in the US. So sometimes you have to go to an Asian shop in the US and the fruit is not usually, it's kind of touch and go. You don't know what the quality is going to be like. But every place that we went to shop was in a plaza. And in the plaza there was bigger grocery stores like Woolworths and Aldi, but there was also these Asian grocery stores, and they had really good high quality fresh produce and amazing fruit, including dragon fruit and custard apples and all kinds of tropical fruit that I don't usually get. So I was super excited. Tip number 5 is about transportation. If you're staying in any kind of central business district or downtown area, I recommend you use public transport or Ubers. Both were pretty easy to do. If you're going to go between cities, like between Sydney and Penrith or Wollongong or wherever, or if you're doing a road trip like we did in New Zealand, it's pretty easy to rent a car and drive over there. The roads are pretty good, infrastructure is great, lanes are well marked. Everybody tends to follow the speed limit. Well, I should say in most places. The only catch is you drive on the left side, which I'll talk about in my next point. Okay, so tip number 6, let's talk a bit more about driving on the left. To be honest, it isn't a big deal. Once you get in the car, you adjust everything, you leave the parking lot, just focus on it for a little bit. Driving on the left is not such a big deal. It's not as scary as you might think. My tip is, after about a week is over, maybe a few days, depending on how long you're staying, you're going to start getting so used to it that you'll get really comfortable. And that's when you have a high risk of making a mistake. So the best way of getting around it is just don't lose your focus and drop your guard. Even though you're feeling really comfortable, it's going to take you a lot longer than a week or 2 weeks to get used to driving on the left instinctively. So it's still going to be something you focus on. But besides that, I found that driving in Sydney, driving in New Zealand was extremely easy because the roads are very well surfaced. They've got clear lane markings. Nothing is faded out, no potholes. People drive the speed limit most of the time. And many of the cars have these assists to keep you in the lane and to make a warning sound if you go above the speed limit. So it automatically knows what the speed limits are. So driving is awesome over there. Highly recommend. Tip number 7 is about where to stay. I stayed at a few different 5-star hotels. I also stayed at motels, which were kind of like 1-star, no amenities. And I stayed at an Airbnb. In all the cases, no matter where we stayed, I had a good time and I felt it was definitely worth what we paid for it. And I think you can't really go wrong when you book lodging in those countries, in New Zealand and Australia. Just go online, pick a location, pick a price point, and choose something that's rated well, so high rankings online, and the place is going to be good. So I didn't have a single bad experience, no matter where I stayed at. And tip number 8 is about whether it actually makes sense to go there and is it really that different. So when we landed, we all said to each other that, are you sure we've landed in a different country? Because it feels just like we're either in Vancouver still, or maybe we're in South Pasadena, or maybe we're somewhere in the Midwest. To be honest, the first couple of days we all were wondering whether it really made sense to have flown halfway across the world and spent 28 hours traveling. But then the third and fourth day, and then beyond that, we started noticing all these differences that we didn't see initially. So there's all kinds of different animals that even if they look similar, they behave different. So we've got there are these crows in Australia that make a sound that sounds like a baby crying or like a cat meowing. It's really odd. It's almost like they're singing. And then there are these songbirds in the petting zoos that we heard that made beautiful melodies you wouldn't normally get to hear in the US. We saw kiwi birds all over New Zealand in enclosures, obviously, and the enclosures were pretty dark, but you wouldn't get to see a kiwi bird anywhere else. We saw wallabies. We saw wild kangaroos just hanging out on the side of the road in a field, just like deer in the US. We saw kangaroos hanging out. That was pretty crazy. Now we were there in winter, so we didn't get to see any of the crazy spiders and things like that. But you definitely get the sense you're in a different country if you spend a few days over there. Tip number 9 is if you visit Australia, don't skip New Zealand. It's a distinct country. It's got a different landscape. It's got different culture, the Maori culture. It's a lot like Hawaiian culture. You gotta experience it. It's also got a lot of geothermal places. There's hot springs, there's geysers, there's redwoods. So if you visit Australia, you definitely got to make a stop in New Zealand. Highly recommended. Tip number 10 is that in general, everybody we met was friendly and helpful and pretty chilled out and laid back. And I guess people over there, they work to live, they don't live to work. That's just my impression. So highly, highly recommend visiting Australia and New Zealand. Thank you for watching.